right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really excited to welcome you to today's web conversation. Moving on up. My name is Scott Kirshner. I have been a longtime columnist for the Boston Globe's business section. Really excited to have all of you here. The first thing I wanted to do is just ask for a little interactivity, if that's okay. I think that Zoom should let you ask this or answer this as a question, but I just love to know, what kind of person are you? Are you an entrepreneur? Are you an employee of one of the bigger companies here in Boston? Are you in marketing, PR? Are you a student? So just use the Zoom question interface to post and let us know maybe where you're logging in from. I don't want to assume everybody's in the Boston area. The first poster is an entrepreneur, new entrepreneur in Detroit. But just tell me who's out here. We have a good audience size already, even though it's only 12:03. We have realtors from Worcester, librarians from Boston. This is a pretty diverse audience here. Newburyport, medium-sized companies, folks who work for big insurance companies in New York State, people who run virtual events. So this is a really great audience. I'm super excited about today's conversation because Jon Hirschtick is somebody that I've known for a long time as an entrepreneur here in the Boston area. We've done at least one of these fireside chats in the past, but it's been a while. Certainly it's been a while since we've seen each other in person. So I think you're in store for a really wide-ranging conversation. Jon is now president of the SaaS Business at PTC, which is one of the biggest software companies here in the state of Massachusetts. They acquired his startup, Onshape, in October of 2019 for a reported $470 million. So not a bad exit for the startup Onshape. And we are going to take a lot of questions. Roger notes the chat is disabled. That is true, but you can use the question interface to get to me and jump into the conversation at any point. Let's see, we have people in business development in the industrial world, folks who are interns at tech startups in Vancouver. So, Jon, why don't you turn on your video and we'll get things rolling here. It's really good to see you.
Hi, Scott. Great to see you.
So where actually are you in the world today?
I'm at my home in Lexington, Massachusetts, just outside of Boston.
That's cool. Hey, the place I want to start, I think this conversation is going to be really wide ranging. I want to take a lot of questions from the participants. The place I want to start, we're going to cover a lot of, what you know about what you do, but let's start by talking about what's going on in the world right now and what does it mean to be a business leader with all of this stuff going on. My hypothesis is that pre-pandemic, pre the election, you already had these big issues around climate change, inclusion, diversity, equity that leaders were working on and thinking about. It just feels like the dial got turned up to 16 in the post-election months. So how do you talk about that with your colleagues and what should leaders be doing and saying at a moment like this?
Well, Scott, I think first and foremost, it's a time when we remember that our first relationship with each other is as fellow human beings. Whether you're speaking to your employees or your customers or me speaking to you or us speaking to this audience, usually we're talking as, whatever our job is as a journalist or a software maker or a user of our software, whatever, we'd be thinking about ourselves in those lights. But really, it's a time when you have to think about people as human beings. We all, no matter what side, I think the first thing we can do is no matter what your feelings are, politically or societally, no two people have the same feelings, but we all have a lot of feelings right now. Wherever you are in this picture, whatever side you take, everyone has pretty strong feelings and emotions. And I think it's great that you're acknowledging right up front, we're going to spend most of the time talking about business and we won't presumably spend the whole time on it. But I think sort of acknowledging that the feelings are in the room is a really great thing just to start with. And I've found that nobody will say it's not, and that's a good starting point. Then secondly, I would say standing up for the things that relate to your business is a fine thing to do in addition to your own personal views. There's things going on in the world that affect our business. And I, for one, am disappointed to see government not spending as much time as I would like to see on things that matter to me: the coronavirus response, cybersecurity, social justice. Those are getting a little bit of a back seat right now, at least at the federal government level, because of all the other obvious things that are eclipsing it.
I guess let me ask one follow-up question and then we'll move on. But like, and maybe I'm asking this question with a personal bias, but like I've always assumed that like stable democracy is a really pretty good foundation to build businesses upon, right? And to plan for the future upon. Do you agree with that premise? Is there
I
anything
do.
that concerns you based on
Yeah.
what you saw last week happening at the Capitol?
Well, I do. I do think that anytime there's people who distrust our court system, that's a problem for us, again, as a human being, but particularly for business. I think I can tell you that here, in the context of thinking about business and entrepreneurship, we rely on systems of laws and courts, and where we have court challenges and numerous court challenges. Um, the idea that one would say, well, despite all the court cases, the courts aren't, the idea of casting doubt in the area of our court system does affect us all in business, because we rely on those courts. We rely on our system of laws to create an environment where we can succeed business wise. And I agree with you, stable democracy is of course better for business. And so hopefully, anyway, those are a couple of the many things, and we could spend, of course, the full hour and more talking about this.
All right, I want to move on maybe to a little bit of lighter stuff, but if you joined us a little bit late, use the question and answer interface in Zoom to just let us know where you're logging in from, what sort of role you're in. We have someone who's a retired executive coach, someone who's in the world of communications and marketing. Let us know geography and kind of what sort of role you're in so we can make this interesting to you. John, my next question is about the MIT Blackjack team, of which you were a founder. For people who may not have read the book Bringing Down the House or seen the movie 21, what was the MIT Blackjack team? And are there some ways that being part of that team has actually, are there some ways that's kind of shaped your career, your thinking?
Yes, well, the MIT Blackjack team was a group of people in one way or another loosely affiliated with MIT, students, staff members, people who lived in the area, but revolved around MIT. It was a group of people, no formal affiliation MIT, that used a couple of different systems to obtain an advantage in playing the game of blackjack, a legal advantage through skill. And this system allowed us to earn money over a period of many years. I was not a founder, just a correction there. I joined and I was part of the team for around 10 years as a player originally, and then as a trainer. I would teach people to play, in a brief time on the management of the team in various ways. And it was highly successful. We won, let's say, collectively millions of dollars in those years, and I had quite a few adventures and fun playing.
Did you ever get banned from casinos in the era that you were playing?
Yes, I did get banned. I did get barred, as we would say. Sometimes those were, very gentle things like, gee, we'd rather you not play here. And other times they were more formal statements that, you're not allowed to play here, which, by the way, you can only do in Nevada. You can't legally do that in Atlantic City, which is
Oh,
interesting.
interesting. So you wound up spending a lot of time in Atlantic City then.
Yeah, actually, I say, notice I'm dated because I talk about Nevada and Atlantic City is the only places to play when, in fact, you can play in most states. As far as I know, the only state they can actually bar you legally in that way was at the time was Nevada.
Do
Yeah, I
you
played a
play
lot in Atlantic City,
do you
but
play it all recreationally today?
occasionally, occasionally if I happen to be in Vegas on a business trip, or I have um, one of my sons is very interested in poker, and I went with him and played a little poker, and I'll stop by the blackjack table. But no, it's just recreationally, just for fun here and
Have
there.
you been up to the Encore Boston Harbor, or are you not interested in like these non sort of slightly lower key casinos in Massachusetts?
Oh, well, Encore is not lower key. I mean, the Encore, Massachusetts. I did walk through there one night. I dropped off one of my young adult children at a concert there, and I figured it would be unsociable not to at least walk through. And I took a look at the different games they were offering. And at the time, my advice, still friendly advice, would be stay away from the blackjack game being dealt in the main part of the floor. It had some really unfavorable rules, and then the game being dealt in the higher stakes area had some slightly more player friendly rules. That may have changed now, given the situation. That was over a year ago that I was in there.
Yeah, I just meant like, you walk out of the casino and you're in the middle of like, industrial
Oh,
wasteland of Everett rather than, like, oh,
yeah.
there's 20 more casinos here.
Yeah, we didn't really. Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, we didn't. Yeah, it's not an efficient way to go if you want to go to multiple casinos, for sure.
Do you feel like that experience, I mean, maybe your actual MIT education has shaped your career more, but like, are there ways that experience, like the sort of learning how to work that system and thinking about risk and trying to read people maybe has influenced your career?
Oh, absolutely, Scott. I think Blackjack gave me a lot of great lessons for business. In entrepreneurship, I'll tell you one about the things you touch on. One that I draw on as we segue to talking about innovation, entrepreneurship, is Blackjack taught me that you can succeed at something even when everyone around you says you can't. Because when I started playing Blackjack and I told my friends about it, most of them thought it was a crazy idea. They're like, well, you'll never succeed at that, or the casinos wouldn't let you do it, or there can't be a system like that, or I have a friend who gambles all the time, or you'll get you'll lose all your money, or it's a scam, or whatever. And I listened to the people who were leading me into the world of blackjack, and we stuck to it. And so that's a powerful lesson, because a lot of innovators and entrepreneurs will hear people around them tell them all the reasons that what they're trying to do can't succeed. And I learned sometimes you can succeed, even when those around you think you can't. I also learned that the long run is much longer than most people understand, and most people in business will over extrapolate small quantities of results, to draw an opinion about people, about products, marketability, or something. Oh, this person, they happen to get lucky once, gets confused with being skillful, and the converse. And it happens all the time. And blackjack sort of teaches you how many trials and repetitions you need to get into a long run statistically, if that's useful.
So, as far as I know, and this will show you like how much deep research I did for this conversation, I associate you with this company called SolidWorks that you started,
Yeah.
and this company called Onshape that you
Yeah.
started, both of which had successful outcomes, right? They were acquired by a bigger player for hundreds of millions of dollars. Have you been involved in any companies that didn't pan out
Well, yeah, I
as a founder?
involved. Yeah, as a founder, I founded another company called Premise before SolidWorks, Scott. We sold that to computer vision, and it was not for hundreds of millions of dollars. Let's just say that. So it wasn't a failure. We were acquired, but it was not the success we had envisioned. But you learn. I always say you learn a lot. You learn in those situations too. So I've been pretty lucky that all three of my companies have sold and found good outcomes. Um, I like to say, I don't think someone's a complete entrepreneur unless they've learned to feel what really successful businesses feel like, and learn to feel like what really challenging, tough it out, or even bad situations feel like. And I've also been on the board of many other companies with a full spectrum of successes and challenges, and been an advisor to different companies. I talk to entrepreneurs all the time as a casual advisor. I just love doing it.
So let me ask you, I mean, my hypothesis is like, look, there's two kinds of businesses in the world. I think you've mostly been involved with type one, which is venture capital funded businesses, right? Where you get these outside investors that, that bet money on you, right? That you're going to build something successful. The much bigger share of businesses in the world, category two, are businesses that people bootstrap, right? Or maybe they get, a loan from, their grandparents, to open up a clothing boutique or to start a car wash or whatever it may be, right? There's many more of those kinds of businesses. I feel like there's so little Venn diagram overlap in the types of advice you could give those two sort of businesses, right?
Yeah.
There's some that's about, hiring people, managing people, but they do feel to me like two very different animals, right? In terms of how you're going to grow those businesses and manage them. But would you push back on that, or do you mostly agree with me that running a business where someone cuts you a check for $20 million and said, go rock on and build out your vision may be different from the person who, gets a second mortgage on their house to start the company?
Well, it is different, but I like to think that I like to think that the differences don't stem from how they are funded. How they are funded stems from the differences in the business. There are different types of capital needs. I always advise entrepreneurs is find the capital and the capital that's compatible with your business, with the ideally you want the capital source that will maximize the chance of success, because when you're starting a company, usually the biggest issue is it going to be the success you dream of or not? And a secondary issue is, gee, what percent of the business will you own when it gets there? Like I say, it's like if you're going to the moon, you want to make sure you get there. Landing there is a big issue, not how much you pay for the gas, and so some business ideas aren't appropriate for venture capital, and would not be well served to get venture capital. And just like I like to say, if you were going to go build a house, you'd want to raise money, you'd want to get a mortgage from someone who finances houses like the one you're going to build, not someone who funds office buildings or someone who funds personal loans for cars. There's sort of a match, and so you have to decide. I think that now sometimes people have a business that really needs venture capital but can't get it, and so then that's a different story. But I really think that every business is different. You need to find the right capital, just like you need to find the right person or technology to put in your business. And venture is right for some and not right for others. There's a big difference in ventures that need a huge sunk cost in order to get to even the first customer. Let's say, like the businesses that I've been building, are like that, because I'm building very complex software. There are other businesses where you can get to that first customer almost immediately, like if you're doing a pure service business or something, and then there's a range in between.
What got you so excited? I want to just talk about inspiration for a second. And what I'm curious, what got you so excited as a young entrepreneur about this world of computer aided design and using computers to create physical objects? Because you really have built your whole career in that space, and I'm guessing you wouldn't have done it if it wasn't something that you said, I love this, and I think this is going to be a big part of the future. Even back in the 80s, right, when most of us hadn't heard of, CAD software, and certainly when you couldn't, easily get CAD software onto a personal computer.
Oh, wow. Great question, Scott. Why do I love the CAD business? I think it's because, first off, it was an intersection of three things that I was really interested in. One was going back in time to the first thing was computer programming. I started programming computers in 1975 as a kid in high school. I had read about computers before then because I had built radios and other electronics. So I loved computer programming. When I came to college, I thought I would want to be a computer science major, but I switched to mechanical engineering because I thought mechanical engineering sounded really interesting. And particularly product design. I just thought product design sounded fascinating. So I had an interest in computer programming, product design. The other thing was geometry. In high school, I had just, I know most people hate geometry so much, it's like a joke. I just loved geometry class. I can remember to this day some of the things we did in my sophomore year in high school geometry class, and we were doing proofs and things. And I just found geometry really interesting. So if you're interested in product design, geometry, and computer programming, and you walk into the internship office at MIT and he says, here's this company that makes CAD software. I'm like, oh, wow, this is several of my interests put together. And so then the other thing to me is I just love the idea that I get to work with my customers, because my customers are all building the future. Every one of the customers in CAD is figuring out what some amazing future manufactured product will be. And I get to give them the tools. Now, I don't build those things. I build the things that they use to build those things. But on the other hand, I get to see this huge spectrum of people that are all building the future of our world. And that's just fun and cool. My co-founder, John McElhaney, who I know, Scott, you know well, Johnny says it's the emotional paycheck of our business. So
What was that first internship? What company was it? Was it a paid internship?
yes, it was a summer internship at Computer Vision in Bedford, Mass in 1981, and it was paid. Yeah, it was
Great.
indeed paid.
The best kind of internship.
It is.
We're starting to get some questions, and I want to actually weave in questions right now. So we'll do like a question break now. We'll get to more a little bit later. First question is from Norman, who wants to know, how should companies prepare for a post-COVID environment? What are some short-term changes that will last, and what are other changes that we should prepare for?
Okay, so for the post-COVID environment, first is, I think, the premiums on agility and speed, and we talk a lot about agile design, and what I'm seeing is I think there's an enormous premium on agility in everything you're doing now. Agility of workforce location, but more particularly agility of what your company builds and how they deliver it to market, if you're manufacturing things or if you're a service provider. So setting yourself to be agile, I learned when I used to coach kids at baseball, there's sort of like a ready position. You get on the balls of your feet, get ready to move if you're an infielder, or you're getting ready to defend someone at basketball, or there's a stance you take to be ready to move. And I think agility is something to be ready for post-COVID in most every aspect of what you do, because it will be changing.
This is a quick question about what was your biggest one-day take with the MIT team at the blackjack tables?
People ask tens of thousands of dollars. Like in one day, how much did I win in the biggest day I ever had? It was probably a number like $40,000 or $50,000. I don't remember it particularly. I played on so many trips that I went on in so many days. It's just a blur.
And this was also money, some of which came from investors, right? Like the team had investors. It wasn't all out of your pocket, right?
No, it was modeled kind of like a venture capital fund or something. You had a bunch of people who would contribute to a collective fund, and then each of the players, maybe at different times, 10, 15 players would all play from that central fund of money. And then after a multi-month period, split the winnings up between investors and players. So yeah, I made that money for the fund, not for my personal pocket.
So let's see, a couple of the questions from that folks submitted in advance. As you build a business, this is a question about saying no from Brian Cusack. He says, as you build a business with all the prioritizing that comes with that, what were the basic and obvious things you had to say no to in order to focus on the truly important things?
You mean within the business? I assume they mean, or
I think he means like, when a customer asks you to do Y and you say, well, we're really kind of trying to build X, or maybe sometimes it's a board member, an investor, right, who says, you should really be chasing this opportunity, you meathead.
Yeah, there's a lot of no's you say explicitly and then no's you say implicitly. So in fact, I think I'd say working with great product designers, one thing I've learned is that great products are defined by what they leave out, not what they put in. So in a sense, most people think, oh, what are we going to put in a new product? It's easy to make a list of things to put into a product. It's hard to make the decisions on what to take out, whether that's in whether that's the example, a very trite example, but you look at the iPhone, everyone's favorite, really successful product. People are like, wow, the iPhone has all these great things. What was amazing about the iPhone design was not what was put in, but what was chosen to be left out. No keyboard, no click wheel. Think of that. Think you're at Apple and you have this product called the iPod, which I assume our listeners remember, runaway success featuring that click wheel. They left it out completely. No SD card slot for memory. It's just missing all kinds of things. And but that's where elegance and beauty come from. So I think the first thing, you've just got to make some hard decisions about who you are and who you aren't. Like for us at Onshape, we said we're going to build a full cloud, full SaaS, software as a service solution, like a Salesforce. And people would say, well, you've got to build an offline version too. No, we're not doing that. Well, what if I don't have good internet? Well, if you don't have good internet, go use some other product. There's plenty of good products, and so you have to be able to do that. So I think you want to, it's tricky. There's no science to it, I can't say, but you do have to say no to things all the time. You have to say no to aspects of your product that could really water down your vision. And so stick to your vision. You also have to say no when it comes to things like go-to-market activity. How should you be selling? Where should you be selling? And some things you also learn to say not no, but defer. Well, that's a good idea, but maybe next year we'll do it. And so it's, each business will have different things, but it's definitely a very, very important skill.
Going back to the question about post-COVID, I'm curious what your thoughts are and maybe how PTC, where you work, is planning for this period. So PTC built this amazing headquarters building in the Boston Seaport district that opened, a year or 18 months, I think, before the pandemic. I'd been to visit Onshape out at the near the Alewife T station and this fairly non-glamorous office park, but still just a few
good location.
Good location near the T.
Near the
But
T.
where you get the engineers together in one place, and I think both situations, right, were a bet on the value of in-person collaboration. Does the post-pandemic world, the post-vaccine world to you look like, okay, this will just be a hybrid where we're going to get some of the value of being together in person and get some of the value of having remote workers who maybe wouldn't have worked for us if they had to commute or in Boston?
I think you have that right, Scott. I think that it will be a hybrid is a good way to look at it. I think that's the best read I would give on what I think PTC will be like. I don't think we'll all return to working as much in the office, but I don't think we'll be home all the time either. And I think I envision our beautiful building in the Seaport as being a place I go to and others go to. It might be for instead of as many routine things, it might be more for special team meetings or days where we say this is a day. Certainly for customer visits, they'll still want to come and see it, but it's there's been certainly a change. The other thing is post-COVID, even once the pandemic is hopefully behind us in terms of controlling where we are, we'll always have to be prepared for a pandemic. I think for decades to come, people will be saying, well, this is great, but what happens when we all have to stay home? It's kind of like snow day preparation for schools, but it'll be a giant version of that. How are we set up to do remote work for when we need to because of whatever reason, and hopefully we won't have these restrictions, but I think it will be in the back of people's minds.
So definitely some more good questions I want to get to from the participants, but just as a follow-up on that vision of hybrid where you have some team members who really don't come into the office much and some maybe who feel like, I want to be away from my needy dog, my dishwasher that needs emptying, my kid, stomping in from school at 3:30. Can you think of a contributor, to one of your companies where I guess I'm asking you, have you had some contributors who were like, this person was a rock star, and you know what? They lived in Denver and I
Oh,
practically never saw them, or they lived in London and I practically never saw them face to face.
oh yeah. Well, we've had great successes with remote work, and remote work isn't a new idea. I mean, we all know there have been um, plenty of remote work being done before. It's been in the mix, just like video conferencing was in the mix, right? It's not like, we didn't do video conferencing until COVID. What happened is both remote work and video conferencing both went on this skyrocketing usage level. And so, yes, in my companies, particularly at Onshape, we have real superstars that live remotely. Our head of customer support, Lou, fantastic part of the company, huge contributor, real superstar on our team, and he lives in the Phoenix area. And but he would come out and visit. But clearly we're doing more remote work now. Where before it was a little bit of the exception. Well, now we're on equal footing. We're all remote. We all know what it feels like. Yeah.
So Roger has two questions in the Q&A. I want to give you your choice on which one you're going to answer. One is, could you recommend a good book on the nuts and bolts of starting a small business, or advice on how to locate the right partner for starting a new
I
business?
can only answer one, huh?
I don't know if you want to do a quick answer on both.
Yeah.
Roger will get a twofer.
All right. Well, on books, let's see. A couple, back when I was in business school, I never went to business school, but I took a class there when I was at MIT. I took an entrepreneurship class. There's a book called New Business Ventures and the Entrepreneur. It's probably hopelessly out of date now. I realize it's probably 40 years old, but some things change, some don't. More recently, I really liked Ben Horowitz's book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things. I think that, if I remember correctly, is pretty good for the whole journey. Even if you've already started a business, and operating and growing it, there were some good lessons in there. There's also, again, this is a little dated, but there was a book called The Portable MBA in Entrepreneurship by Bill Bygrave. There's a book by Bill Aulet, which I read in manuscript form before it had the
It's
title on the
called
team.
Disciplined Entrepreneurship.
Discipline. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
Bill Aulet. He's a good writer. Those are some quick ones I'd refer you to. The other thing I'd encourage you to realize, which you may already know, is entrepreneurship is a craft. It's not a science, and that's why we read and why we talk about it so much, because it's just not a closed form. And then the second question was about finding your partner. Sound a little Mandalorian like, trust your feelings, trust how you feel about people. People ask me, if you've never built a team, you'll say, well, how do you know how to choose someone for a team? And my response when I speak at business school classes quite often in the pre-COVID era and entrepreneurship at MIT and elsewhere, and this question usually comes up, and I'll say, you all have experience in selecting teams. Don't think that, just because you're earlier in your career in life, if I said to you right now, I need to do when you're a college student, if I said I need to do a project, I'm going to ask you to do a project in designing something, who would you pick? You know who you'd pick. You'd look around the room of students and say, oh yeah, that's the person. Or if I said to you, I'm going to need to have a sports team, you know who you'd pick. So use some of those skills. Remember that in some ways it's like the business version of getting married. You need to think about not only the good times, but the tough times. My father always said, you find out who your friends are in the tough times. So someone you've been through something challenging with is more important to look for than someone who you've been through just good times. The other thing I would say is, if you're looking for experience in something, like say you're thinking, oh, I need someone who knows about marketing, and you've never done marketing, go find examples of people who've done marketing before you recruit. Like, you can't acquire marketing skills instantly. You just can't do that. But go meet someone who's a model, who you say, hey, I get it now. I test drive, go meet someone, even if they're not a candidate. So if you're looking for a co-founder, maybe go meet some people who have founded companies and say, that's the kind of co-founder I want. but you want co-founders are very special people to choose. I've had the real luxury of real incredible, fantastic co-founders in my career. I mean, really, really some amazing people. And I think it's because of the instincts about just thinking them as great people, that my instincts told me they were, in addition to looking at their skills on the resume.
So your co-founder, John McElhaney, I always think of him as the more outgoing. He must be the more sales and marketing oriented of the two Johns. Is that true? I met him before I
Yeah,
met
he
you.
is.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's more sales and marketing. He's also more operational. Like, I think Johnny is a better manager than I am. I'm not much of a manager myself. And yeah, we each bring different things. I also think, if I may inject, one of my favorite metaphors about team building is, too often we define who we're looking for based on a spec, and we really should be thinking of it more like the stone wall building, team building. I call it like a stone garden wall. You ever watch how one of those is built? They're all irregular stones, and the art is to fit them together. And that's what team building is about. And so when you build a stone garden wall, you might think, hey, I need a largest stone that maybe has a little flatness to it. But you don't think, oh, I need one that's exactly this wide, and exactly this high, and exactly this deep. And really, the art in team building is to craft that strong stone garden wall. And John McElhaney and I fit together. We work together in a way that others may not. And I really encourage you to think about that metaphor, the stone wall team building. As you craft it, you may have a great person who doesn't fit in your stone wall, and you may have to change your definition of what a VP of R&D does depending on the exact person you find, and say, well, we'll supplement them in this way, or we'll cover another area we didn't think about. And so that kind of flexibility of mind is really important to crafting great founding teams, I think.
So I love your Stonewall metaphor, but I think that what happened in March of 2020 was like 18-wheeler kind of blew through the Stonewall, right? And so now we are working in this way of, the stones are all still there, right? You still have that team largely, but there's a lot more space between the stones, right? You don't bump. Wait, let me just play this out. And you don't run into them at the coffee maker anymore. You don't
True.
go out for drinks after work. So, like, what's one thing that you feel like you've had to add to your management toolbox or do differently to to just make that still feel like a team, as opposed to 500 people all off in their own kind of hidey holes working alone?
Well, you obviously have to work harder to get personal interactions with people. So it's not only missing the face-to-face, it's missing the impromptu communications. So what I mean by that, internally, it's missing the walk by the desk. In meetings with customers, it's missing the coffee break time when you'd stand, and you'd have a subgroup broken out. So what do you do about it? Well, a few things we've done is try to put an eye on the human contact a little bit more. So I'm setting up more one-on-one meetings with employees I wouldn't normally see in the course of my work. Now, with hundreds of employees in my team, there's only so much of that I can do, but it's helping, I think, and I'm talking to people. So I set up meetings for no other reason than to check in. And I would do that to a certain degree in groups in the old world, but now I do that even more. John and I have always written holiday cards to each person on our team. We write one card that we each try to message to everyone. This year I wrote 190 some holiday cards out with Johnny. And we almost could have said, well, the team's too big this year, because it grew a lot this year. Our team grew dramatically. But we both felt, no, just the opposite. This is a really important year to at least show people that we, the special impact of some kind of personal touch. I think those are two of the things. I think we're having a more discussion, both the situation in the world in general, like I said at the opening, acknowledging people's feelings a little more about the world at large. Those are some of the things that we're doing to try to stay in touch. But I think we're lucky because what's happening is we're coasting a little bit on the interpersonal capital we had coming into this, and that is helping us weather this year, and it'll need to be rebuilt at some point.
Are you guys going to be hiring in 2021? If you think about the SaaS business within PTC, is that going to hire 50 people, 100 people, 200 people this year?
I won't say a number because we haven't released that publicly, but oh yes, we're hiring, and you'd see the job postings and whatever. PTC is growing our SaaS business unit. We've excitingly recently announced the agreement to acquire Arena, which is a market-leading SaaS provider of PLM, or product lifecycle management. They'll be pending the closing of the acquisition, using the usual, Scott would know, the usual speak around these things. It's not closed. Pending the expected closing of it, they will be joining the SaaS unit too. But yeah, we're growing and hiring. We've been hiring in 2020 quite a few people, and we're finding we're able to do all that remotely. In fact, there's some opportunity because we're looking to hire people in places that we wouldn't have looked before. We've had employees come in from new universities, new backgrounds. That improves our diversity too. We didn't touch on diversity, but I think remote work's a plus point for diversity, because in general, there's more diversity in the remote world than there is in the seaport in Boston, to say the least.
Yeah. We have a lot of great questions I want to try to get to. I
Okay,
also
cool.
want to mention that if people are thinking like, oh, I should maybe log off this webcast and go do some productive work or go get some lunch, we have some magic tricks coming up. So stay tuned for that. Karen wants to know, she is an assistant professor of experiential learning, wondering if you think students coming into the workforce in the next few years will want hybrid and remote work, having essentially come of age in this pandemic. What would you recommend to those of us prepping students for the world of work, that we teach our students about this new workplace? So kind of two questions there. Do you think students are going to want more of this remote flexibility, and are there skills that are kind of new and important?
I think that that they will not only want it, but they will expect it and assume it's the new normal, to the point where I think in the future, you won't interview students and say, oh, I want to tell you, we have a hybrid workplace. That'll be assumed. And even the option to work remote. I think in the future, what you'll have to do is go out of your way to tell someone if a job requires them to be here. You'll have to say, whoa, let me let you know something right away. This job requires you to be in the office, because you wouldn't have assumed that. It's like that's what happens in new normal. So I think absolutely, hybrid workplace will be the norm. And that's, by saying hybrid, it allows us to cover a very wide range from 90-10 remote to 90-10 in person. Those are all hybrid. So I think the best thing you can do as an educator is to first of all model that with the education you're offering, which is education's been forced to go at least hybrid, if not all remote. The obvious thing. And the genie's out of the bottle on that, as our CEO, Jim Heppelman, says, and it won't, you won't go back to all live, I don't think. And so you'll be naturally preparing students for that world, and they'll be preparing you, because the students are ahead of the institutions in these things. Like, I think students were better prepared than teachers for remote learning. Right? I mean, that's sort of obvious. Like with my own kids, I have 6 kids and stepkids, several of whom in college. And my college freshman came home and said, Dad, the teachers really, the professors are really awkward at using these tools. And, my son's uses them all the time in gaming and with his friends. And, so the students may be able to teach a little bit on that.
So you mentioned Jim Heppelman, the CEO of PTC. The last time I saw him give a talk, he was talking about augmented reality and, sort of AR being a really important future direction for computing and for PTC. Obviously, once you put on your digital glasses, you need to have lots of three-dimensional models of stuff, right, to be able
Yeah.
to overlay it on the real world. Talk
For
about kind
some
of
applications. Yeah.
for some
Go ahead.
applications.
Yeah.
But so, talk about what you see as the promise of AR. And I know you've been an advisor to this company, Magic Leap, which is like one of the best funded companies in augmented
Yeah.
reality, trying to develop the hardware for it. It seems like they're going to be an interesting case study at some point in timing, right? And when is it the right moment for the mainstreaming, or what is the right price point, or maybe something
Yeah.
else for kind of mainstream AR glasses?
So you asked a bunch of questions. So augmented reality has been booming during COVID use for obvious reasons. Basically, PTC, we're very lucky that a lot of the things that we've been pushing, digital transformation of manufacturing, whether it's through CAD, product lifecycle management, augmented reality, Internet of Things, SaaS-based systems. Guess what? Every one of those, I feel bad. I know COVID's been bad for so many businesses, but for us, it's been good. And we're fortunate in that way. For our customers, it's been good. Augmented reality has been fantastic. We had customers rushing to set up, new manufacturing lines. Like I said, agility. Like we need to make masks. We need to make this product we used to make in this factory. We need to make in this factory. And sending all the people there, even if they were willing to go, isn't an option. How do we train people? And well, it turns out PTC has these fantastic augmented reality products for the industrial worker, the frontline worker, the people who can't do their job with Zoom. You and I, Scott, a lot of what we do, we can do with Zoom. But if you're a factory worker, you can't assemble a new car over a Zoom meeting. Well, with PTC's tech, we can train workers. We can have the expert worker teach using an AR system, easily teach someone a procedure, and then provide that instruction to a worker in another place. And it's incredibly productive versus, reading a manual and stuff. No young person is going to go in the factory and say, "Oh, great, I get to read a paper manual on how to assemble this, alternator for a car." But put on the headset and that job becomes cool. And so our AR business is really producing real success and is way ahead of the commercial world. When you said mainstream acceptance, well, we're not really making AR applications primarily for people to use at home, although we are used, PTC AR tech is used in Vivino, Lego, IKEA, Mercedes, these sorts of AR apps that you'd use as a consumer. But we're really doing great in the industrial world. And I'm trying to remember, did I answer? So augmented reality, fantastic. It's really gratifying to be able to help these companies even more than ever. And it's a growth business. And Jim was very wise to get into it.
Do you have a projection on the typical person and when they're going to own a pair of AR glasses?
Gosh, I don't. Again, we're focusing more on the industrial world where today, like I say, it's way ahead of where you'll be. I am a big fan of AR over VR. VR, I
Mhm.
find much more limiting. AR involves augmenting what you see in the real world with 3D, but sometimes just with regular information, just with images, with directional indicators, with text, it's about putting that info where someone needs it. I don't know when. I really couldn't make a prediction. There are people who think that very exciting things are coming in headsets and eyewear, and I do believe the world's going to get better in that way, and we'll see more and more exciting announcements. It's all good for those of us who build the software that run on them.
No, I didn't think of this until like 3 minutes before the Zoom started, but I did do some research before this meeting, which told me that not only do you play blackjack, but you also like to do magic. And so I asked, do you happen to have a deck of cards handy? And you're like, oh, yeah, it's right here. Let me pull it out of
Yeah.
the drawer. So I bet most people, amidst all the endless Zoom meetings of the last 10 months, have probably not seen magic tricks on Zoom, John. So the bar is quite low, but would you show us a trick or two?
Yeah, I want to emphasize that Scott asked me to do this, and he did it moments before the meeting, and and I didn't prepare anything really, right? I'll show you what I showed him right before. So I had this deck of cards here in my desk, and I want to, I just pulled it out when Scott asked me about doing some tricks here, and I'll show you. First of all, I want to assure you that this is not any kind of trick deck or anything, but I do want to say that sometimes if you look at any deck of cards, and if anyone wants me to do this, if you see me live, I'll do it with your deck of cards. I'll do the same thing. I don't know if you noticed these cards were all blank. You see that? They're actually, did you catch that? That they were actually all blank there. And oh wait, no, they're printed. Okay, there's just a look. We can make anything can appear different than it looks right away. Another thing I'll do here, I'll just do a little thing here. I'm going to take these cards and I'm going to mix them up, some down. Again, I don't know if you can see this. I'm not used to
I
performing.
can see it. Yeah. Zoom magic is its own genre, right?
But, part of business is straightening out complex messes. And there we've done it again with the deck of cards. We've got it all back in order. I'll just show you, again, I don't have time to do any real big tricks or anything, but I'll show you little things I learned as a kid. Here, we'll take this card. Okay. We've got this jack here. I'm going to take that and take it over to the screen. And, oh, wait a minute. It never really left my hand back there. Did you catch that?
Oh, I love it, John. This is the best. I would, not only for birthday parties, but any Zoom meeting, I feel like is livened up by a little.
Oh, well, you know what? I never thought
Close-up
of really
magic.
doing any. I do a whole talk on the Blackjack team, and I'm doing here a one-handed cut, which I know about. I know about 10 different ways to cut the cards with one hand, including some I invented myself, because I'm a little out of practice. So I do stuff like springing the cards here. I can't.
Wait, hold it up a little higher.
Yeah, well, I'm not used to. I'm used to doing it at a bigger distance against my stuff like that. I can throw cards. I had an idle youth when I was a young teenager. This is what I did in the summers and stuff. I used to always have a deck of cards in my hand. Magic taught me a lot about preparation and discipline, because in order to do certain magic tricks, you really have to practice over and over and over again. And that's a good skill when you think about demos. Demoing software is very much like that. You have to practice, you have to be prepared to speak while you're doing something complicated. A lot of great skills. Magic also teaches you how people think. Anyway, thanks for asking. If you had fun, believe me, I had more fun showing it to you. So.
I love it. I'd love to take a couple last questions from our participants. Like one question, John, is just the, sort of what's happened. I mentioned the PTC acquisition of Onshape was 2019. I mentioned, or I've observed, my 12-year-old in school was learning to use Onshape for some of the projects that they had in school, which was cool to see it getting into the education world. But what give us the capsule of kind of what's happened since the acquisition of Onshape? You said hiring is one thing.
Yeah, our acquisition, being part of PTC, has been really successful. First of all, PTC has been really successful. I mean, just look at the public financial data. Stocks at an all-time high. It's been a fantastic. We've been here now 14 months. And in those 14 months, it's been a success for our team, which has grown dramatically. Very few of the original team have left. I mean, a few, but not very, very low number. We've reached a lot more commercial customers, our paying customers, so to speak. But in education, it's exploded. And people like, did you say, was it your son you said is using this? Yeah, your son. We are close to 1 million student and teacher accounts in Onshape. We have a free edition. We just came out with an advanced edition called Education Enterprise for whole schools and districts. That actually is going to require a small charge, but for this year we waived it for COVID. And we have a huge number of educational institutions. What's really satisfying about that, Scott, is that teachers tell us and students tell us, not only are we a better tool, but in many cases we save the curriculum. Like they wouldn't have been able to teach it at all without Onshape. And in many other cases, we feel that we've most helped communities that are under-resourced, underserved, communities of color, communities of less, less wealth. It's the places that don't, can't afford the Windows computer labs, the places where all they might have, if they have internet service, and we need the internet service, but we can use an Android tablet or an Android phone to let a child experience the power of state-of-the-art 3D modeling. And that's been a lifesaver for teachers and very gratifying for us. So the other thing we're doing is we're using the core of our technology to create something called the Atlas platform. And we're already shipping, or soon shipping, at least one product from each of PTC's product lines that use this Atlas platform. So it's really exciting for us to be leveraging that even more. And best of all, customers have been using Onshape, maybe not best of all, but also to do all these innovation for good projects where they're building ventilators and personal protective gear to fight COVID. And we're really gratified by that. So it's been a really successful year. We're really, I love what I do. I'm lucky that this is, this year has, in the face of COVID, still been a good one for us.
I want to get in one last question here, maybe a quick answer. Also mention, I see that Jules Pieri is out there, and she mentioned, I wrote a book called How We Make Stuff Now that's about entrepreneurship among people making physical products. So another book recommendation. Thanks for mentioning that, Jules. Angela Plummer wants to know, what have you done to get inspiration during this pandemic? And I think it's a great question, right? Because it has been a bit of a grind.
It has been, and it's a grind for me, mostly because of the, all the turmoil and the external, in the world outside our business, social world, whether it's the social justice issues and social injustice that we see in our world, the social justice we want, or all the stress in the world now. And everyone knows somebody who's had their economic well-being or their health deeply impacted in themselves or their family in COVID. So with all that, where do I go for inspiration? Wow. Certainly some of my friends and colleagues. I guess an odd answer would be I'm really enjoying watching some shows with my young adult children. We've enjoyed as a family watching things like Mandalorian. That's an escape. What else for inspiration? The talking in more depth, because my young adult kids are home with me instead of being at college, because college has gone remote, and talking with them about the real meaning in some of those shows. I found that inspirational. I found inspiration in watching the very good things that some of the people in our world are doing and standing up for during these times. Even in the events of the last week, you can see some of the worst of what humanity is about, but you can also see some of the best in some examples of what some people have done. And I could elaborate on that. And it's easy to focus on the worst, but sometimes you can also say, there was a good thing that inspired me and something that someone did.
There's a lot more to talk about. That was a great answer. I can't believe how quickly this time has gone. I want to applaud not just you, Jon, but all of our participants for great questions and
I'll
for
applaud
being
them.
such an
Thank you.
engaged audience.
Yeah,
I do
thanks for
feel like the
showing
one
up.
thing missing from Zoom is like you never hear applause. So my thing is I actually applaud for people. Hopefully you'll tune into another Globe event sometime soon. Thanks to PTC and the PTC team, the Globe team, for making all this happen. Jon, it was great to see you. Hold up your cards one more time. I'm going to take a little Zoom screenshot so I can say like, oh, this was the most fun Zoom of 2021 so far
Was
because
it really?
Jon entertained us with card tricks.
Yeah, well, it's only
I'm at the ready.
Uh,
All right.
That's what you want?
Yeah, that's perfect. All right. I love it.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Scott.